my name is Madison Miner, and I'm here with Protect Our Kids podcast called Say What. Thank you so much for being with us today. My guest on the show is a good friend of mine, Mellisa Crew, and she is joining us as the creator of Moms on the Ground, but also doing amazing research called the Trans Student Hustle. So she's with us today, so please welcome her to the show.
Hi. Thanks for having me, Madison.
Absolutely, Mellisa. Thank you so much for being on the show today. We have a lot of information to cover because you have done your due diligence when it comes to research. What was your wake-up moment, and what kind of spawned this interest in doing research?
I think there wasn't necessarily a distinctive moment. It was more of like a gradual awakening, and it kind of started for me because of some difficulties, strangely, that I was having in my business, and just some legislation that had passed. And so then out of the frustration of that, I started learning about legislation having to do with kids in school and sex ed and all of these things. And so that kind of took me down this rabbit hole of wanting to really read documents and have like factual information rather than he said, she said. I wanted things from the horse's mouth, from the print, So I love mysteries, and I love doing ancestry research and stuff like that. So like this whole thing of like finding the documentable proof is just, it's kind of like strangely fun.
I get that.
I mean, I don't like the information I found, but yeah. So
you became informed. You started learning, going, I'm guessing, to your own school board meetings. What did you do once you started the research process? What was your first step in finding more and more information?
Well, I think so, like, just to back up, like, what's interesting on this is it's like, this whole like agenda is not limited to public schools. Like, my kids were actually in private school. So I had a personal experience with a teacher coming in and creating this thing called the Unity Club. It was kept secret from the parents. They were talking about, sex and sexuality and gender. And I only discovered it because there was like an open house. And this was like during COVID. So very few people showed up. It was like a strange time of day, very different from what they normally did. And so I started seeing these posters all over the place of like these rainbow Uncle Sams. And I'm like, wait a minute, what is this? And so I dug deeper into that with my own children, and then found that, in this quote unquote Christian school where they had been teaching my kids creation, that there was this other agenda at play. And so, I had to pull my kids out of that school.
Wow.
And I first tried to have a lot of conversations to say like, hey, I understand that they may be your viewpoint, but it's not ours. And in fact, like, you taught my children creation of man and woman. And so like, I don't understand what's happening with the discussion of all of these multiple genders. And so, I really tried, but this was just being really forced down our throats. And that's kind of where the networking thing started. I started like talking to friends within the community, and then just realizing, how much power we have in numbers. And, so they had a mass exodus like from that school
Wow.
based upon like these photographs that a lot of different information. And so but then I started thinking, I'm a taxpayer. And the fact that like I'm paying tuition and taxes, and I can't send my kids to these schools because they discriminate against my worldview. They have a one worldview that they want to promote, and they want to make your worldview wrong, or, and it's always this like gaslighting, name calling. It's
how dare you?
Right. And it's funny that they always put this under the banner of inclusivity, because like it doesn't include me,
Right.
in fact, it excludes and tries to make parents like me villainous, and that's what we found like in these records. So moving forward to, as you said, in my district, which is Capistrano Unified, there were a lot of things that started making me pay attention. But then when this whole thing of a parental notification policy was put on the agenda, I attended that meeting, and, hundreds of, and having this, moms group from way back with a following, like, we had encouraged people to come out. I went around to different neighborhoods with friends of mine with flyers, handing out flyers in Spanish and in different languages, like, please come. This is your chance to stand for something. I think a lot of people feel really afraid about standing against something, so this was their opportunity to say, hey, yes, I want to be informed as a parent. And I thought that would feel easier to people. So hundreds of parents showed up, and it was really clear to me at that meeting that there was a maneuver happening, and that these kids, so what happened?
This was just recent. This was last year. Yeah. I remember this board meeting.
Yes. And do you want me to go into the detail?
Yeah, okay. Absolutely.
I know I have a tendency to ramble, so just reel me back in.
No problem.
So what happened was, we're at this meeting, there are hundreds of parents, and somebody came up with this thing of like, okay, the parents wear white, right? So you could distinguish, who was there, and that crowd of parents way outnumbered this other crowd that showed up with rainbow flags and all of this stuff. And however, the way that the school board structured it was to there's a I'm spacing on what it's called right now, but it's a rule, a policy, yes, to have like I used to know the number of the policy, but it allows students to speak first at the school board meetings. And so, when they were giving out these speaker cards, the kids would go first, and somehow there were like 60 kids that showed up, and somehow. And so, and then the adults, it was divided equally with the adults between those in favor and those opposed. And so it was very clear to me that the deck had been stacked against the parents, and that was done by the school board trustees. And we found that to be true, a coordination between teachers who were aligned with these school board trustees. And those trustees and teachers were aligned with an LGBTQ center. So how did they communicate? How did you discover their communication? Emails. So we did California Public Records Act. And so it just was super clear to me listening to these kids' voices, that these are not their words. They were stumbling. It's really fascinating to go back and look at that meeting. I want to say it was October 18th of last year. Okay. I forget the date, but that would be really interesting for listeners to listen to if they're interested, because these voices and how they were stumbling over words and not even really clear about what they were speaking to. And so we found all of these records showing that they had been recruited into doing this. And in fact, there was a little 8-year-old girl, and this is kind of really what stood out to me is, after the meeting that night, realizing that this maneuver had gone on, I went home and I listened, to their little voices. And I was just so disturbed that adults would manipulate children like this. And especially, I knew that it was most likely during the school day. And so we requested records from the school, and we were couldn't believe everything that we found, flyers and meetings and kids being put to work on this during the school day. It was crazy. Wow. And so they coordinate, these teachers, administrators, school board members are coordinating with children. Did the parents of those children, do you think they knew? I don't believe so. I think what I saw was that they had sort of positioned, in these records and these flyers, anyone who was opposing what they wanted, which, they wanted the parents to be kept in the dark. And the reason that they want that is so that they can go about recruiting kids into this whole what I call the trans student hustle. And that's because there's money at play, and so the trustees are towing the line for their political party at the state level. And there's money that comes down, to the districts. And so I do not believe that many of the parents, I can't really speak to specifically the kids that, spoke at the meeting, but I mentioned this one little, I think 8-year-old girl who was talking about changing her pronouns, and the creepy part is you can hear this adult whispering to her saying, okay, you've got this, go up there now. And the little girl, feeling afraid, and her very publicly saying, when I changed my pronouns, it was devastating to see that this kid was actually being, coached up to say this publicly. And then there were these people outside, and the adult says to the child, and again, you hear it, do you hear all those people cheering for you? So it's you can just see how dangerous this is. Like, is this really what this kid feels in their heart of hearts, or is this something that they're, gaining attention from, and, these adults forcing their own agenda onto children,
right?
And I think that those children deserve to be protected, even if, I don't know who that person was with this child, but like I said, then the other people other kids who spoke at this and were speaking in favor of keeping the parents out of the picture. It was very much positioned like the parents were hate groups. Like, we found all of this stuff, like calling anyone who opposed this parental notification, or who was in favor of the parental notification policy, anyone who was in favor of it, hate groups and
extremists.
Yeah. Like, there was, and the records were incredible. And you would think, like, the reason that I look for records a lot too is because, you can't really argue with that, right? Because it's from the horse's mouth. Like,
right.
And we could totally see that this LGBTQ center, that this lady, was this lady, Stephanie Camacho Van Dyke. I don't know if you know this name, but she was the head of the LGBTQ Center of Orange County. And then that's where I discovered, like, and I don't want to take over your interview, but that's how I kind of came to know about your district and, like, what was being done, how they were organizing, your recall. Like, they were organizing, like, this is not, these are not just
singly capo. It's a bigger picture.
It's a huge picture, and it's
a web. It's a spider web.
And it's not limited to Orange County, and it's not limited to California. It's basically a huge money grab. And so seeing that in capo, and then asking the question, why this maneuver? Like, then, generally, as usually it is, of money or power, right? And so digging into that, finding this coordination, finding all these records that showed, these centers showing up almost like salespeople, like showing up to the campuses during the school day, being enticed to attend things by being given pizza. In San Diego, they're busing kids, to these centers to have them try on clothes of the opposite gender. Parents don't know.
They don't know.
And we see in Irvine records.
It's free childcare.
Yeah. And the parents, I suspect that, there are a lot of just super hardworking parents that don't have the ability or the bandwidth to, like, dig, like, the way that you have to dig. And a lot of times there's a lot of roadblocks that go up in trying to just, like, get these records. In fact,
absolutely. I'm actually shocked you got them.
Well, it was earlier on, like, we're definitely having more difficulty, like Irvine Unified, for example. Like, I call that ground zero of Orange County, because, and they do this stuff a lot in districts where the parents' first language,
It's
a
not
lot of them,
English.
it's not English, right?
Yeah.
So Irvine, Santa Ana, these places where the parents are not going to pick up on it. But Irvine has its own dedicated, and a lot of its own dedicated LGBTQ counseling center. And in fact, that's what, I forgot to tell you this. It's just like, so that's what happened is I was thinking to myself, like, I'm going to go, because I always want to seek to understand. Like, that's why the documents too, right? So I was like, I am going to force myself to go up to someone and try to understand their point of view, because I just don't understand this. Like, so, like, the Christian in me is like, I need to force myself to do this. And I approached this lady
At the board meeting.
Yes. So this was at the parental notification. I'm sorry if I'm.
No, you're great. You're great.
But so I go up to this lady and she had a name badge. It's like, hello, my name, but it just said Capo Parent. And what's funny that I discovered after this is, like, they always have props, these people, and like they are manufactured to be there. They bring little candles, and she had a name badge, and she's standing there
matching shirts.
She's standing there with two other women. And I was like, hi, my name's Mellisa. Can I just ask you, like, I want to really understand your perspective, and can I just ask you, like, why would you not want to be informed? Like, are you a capo parent? And she said, yeah. And, but then I came to learn, because I like to talk and I like conversation and asking questions about people. I came to learn that she was actually an employee at Irvine Unified.
Oh,
and
wow.
so, yes. And so, you start to see all the incestuous kind of situations going on. Mm-hmm. And what was hilarious is I had all this network of, these moms. And so I was just talking to this great friend of mine who helped me with a lot of records. And that's the thing, is like you had mentioned in the beginning, like of all of my research, like it's not me alone. I could not get anywhere near of what I've had without like all of these awesome parents, and in this particular case, this incredible, great friend of mine, mom, and she, I described the woman and she's like, is this her? She sent me a picture like within minutes, like, is this her? And I was like, oh my gosh, yes. And it turns out, she's the boss of the person who runs the LGBTQ center.
Wow.
That's in Irvine. But backing up, I think you asked me a question and I just went over. But
no,
it was,
okay.
It was the thing about Irvine.
Okay. And well, you did all this research.
But like
you did all this research, finding the PRAs and getting information from these school districts and how it is so hard to get PRAs back. I don't get it, but I feel like they are deleting, omitting, or
clamping down. So like, I think like in the beginning, because we did a lot and we got a lot before I released the Trans Student Hustle, we got a lot of stuff. So I think, but since then, and that was the point I was going to try to make about Irvine and about it being ground zero, is that, that's where one of these moms like found these records showing, that they were lying to parents, like calling the kid, make sure when you talk to the parents that you're making sure you say him and not her. And the parents don't know. And they got a number. This was in June of 2023. There were 110 kids with gender support plans in Irvine Unified. Wow. And 94 of them were, I think, middle school and high school. And then there were, 16 that were elementary school kids, Wow. And this is not being communicated to parents. We have records that show it's not being communicated to parents.
In fact, they're being told not to tell parents.
Yes.
And to use different words in front of the parents. As I remember learning that there was actually a different filing cabinet for student records, where if the parent came in, this was when I was in Orange.
Wow.
If the parent came in, they would receive, filing cabinet A folder about their student. And then if the student were in the office, then they would bring out filing cabinet B folder. So they actually do lock away the hidden thing that they have this secret with your child.
And I think in the ranks of these people that they employ, like it's like these people are soldiers in their army. It's the most bizarre thing because, they really, blocking parents from their kids' educational records. Like, that's California's under investigation for that now, right? With the FERPA. And I mean, I've experienced this multiple times where like I've been with a parent trying to get her own child's educational record in Irvine, by the way. And, she was being blocked. And
right.
So what they've done is like, since that 2023 number, like what I wanted to see is like, okay, we know that they're recruiting. And so how much has this number grown? Like, what can we show, on a graph? Like, what would this look like? Because I would guarantee that there is a steep incline in the number of kids identifying, having gender support plans because of the recruitment. And then the constant bombardment of these kids. Like it's crazy when you're going through these records that these things are at school, and for me growing up, like school is a safe place for me. Like I didn't have necessarily a safe home. My mom was an alcoholic addict. So like, I think of all of these kids that have parents that are struggling with addictions or just trying to make ends meet. And, their kids, they're sending them to school thinking that they're safe, and here they're being preyed upon because they have a dollar sign on their head.
All right. So in your slides in the Trans Student Hustle, you discuss the concept of informed consent. What do you feel is the importance with this, and can you explain why it matters so much to you?
So informed consent is to me, like that was the part that was the most disgusting discovery in all of these records, and we got records from all across the state of California, was the secrecy, the planning, like with someone's child, and to me, it's like, I carried my child. I was the one who couldn't eat sushi or lunch meat, or I had to sleep on my left side and do all of these things. And we start teaching our children, like really from the moment that they're born. So how dare you try to get in between that bond between parent and child, and most especially if a child is struggling with something, that needs to be really handled with care and respect and communication. And it was just really scary to me that this kind of stuff was happening, and then seeing the coordination with legislation that was being written to be able to have kids receive medical services without their parents' knowledge or consent. And just as a parent myself, I was like, this is not okay, and parents need to know that this is happening. And a lot of times people are not, they're busy, they're not informed,
Right.
and so to me, like, you should have a permission slip before ever talking to my kid about anything about sexuality.
Yeah.
If it is outside of the realm of the curriculum that I have already seen, then there needs to be a permission slip, and
Right.
because this is my child. It's not a government child.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. So you have this team. You have this team of volunteers, parents helping you out to gain this information. What does that look like? What does that entail when it comes to how you share it? And I know the slides obviously helped with that, but what did you do with all of the PRAs that you received back from these school districts?
It was monumental. Like I said, there were a lot of different documents coming from a lot of different directions, and we're still on my way here today. I'm talking to a parent about more documents, and so it was hard to get that information out or figure out a way that I could put it out. And I just, as I was discovering this stuff and putting together this coordination, like that you could see this in every single district, like that the money coming into the research hospitals working in hand with the LGBTQ centers, that liaisons from the centers going to school campuses to recruit kids for this child patient mill. Like, it was criminal to me, and trying to figure out, like, how do I communicate all of this, like, very simply, and, prayed a lot, cried a lot, because, like, I was so horrified by.
Can't unsee it.
No, and it says in the beginning of of the slideshow, the hashtag, and I try to, like, I'm like, I need to have a hashtag, because, like, I wanted it to be something that people could, have a short name of, like, if you look this up, that it would take you directly to what is this trans student hustle,
Yeah.
And so, a lot of prayer, and then just, like, sitting down to try to, like, how do I tell this story in the simplest way? And I was invited to a church by a dear friend to talk about the trans student hustle. And it was going to be a group of people that were not English as a first language. And so I decided to put together some type of infographic to try to, like, simplify with pictures, and that helped me actually to organize, what I was trying to say, because it is really complicated, the way that they have structured this. But when you see that pattern over and over again, it's like a template that's used. And then, what I found out, that once we were getting the news out about this, that people contacted me from other states saying that they found the same in records in their state. So,
it's not just California, corrupt California. It's,
right. No,
it's nationwide.
And during the Biden administration, it's the blue states majority, but there's still people, like, pushing these agendas in other states, because there's still money around this. And so, I think what's amazing is that at the time, it's like everything is in God's timing, not mine. And, I would feel like this lack of hope, and then something would happen. And never in my wildest dreams, when I was reading through a lot of this stuff, it was Christmas. It was the Christmas season. And it, all of this stuff is just very heavy to know that, like, children are being preyed upon in this mass way, in this very organized way. And, it's not that there's just like all of these diabolical people that are trying to destroy children. It's that there's a lot of people that have a lot of greed and ambition and, and all of those bad, those things that when they are distorted, they create harm. And so like I was looking at this stuff, and I never dreamed that, now there would be this Doge, right? Because there was like this website that I had, and I would be given like these little pieces from various people. And, I could see then the money coming into these different buckets, like with HHS and the Department of Education. And I could see the grant money coming in for these research hospitals. And so, and I kept like asking around, does anyone know a forensic accountant? Because I really wanted to dig even deeper to find the money trail. And I'm very hopeful that day will come, like through the Doge. Yeah. But, and I think again, it's like as they were finding all of these things outside of our country, money being spent to like push this agenda outside of our country. I think even that in God's timing, the fact that I think that it kind of makes it more believable and palatable that it could be happening in your own backyard. Whereas a lot of parents, it's very inconvenient to know the truth, right? They want to remain in denial about stuff, and because then you don't have to do anything about it. But like, sometimes taking bite-sized things, like understanding that this is happening, in another country may make it more understandable that it is happening in your own backyard. Right. And even though you have these documents, it's sometimes really difficult to have people actually look at the documents. Like just look at the documents. Yeah. Like, what do you have,
So you have these slides, you've created this incredible, which we'll include here on a link to it, but you have these slides that you've created and you've now shown it your first time at a church. What was the response from the individuals that got to see your slides?
The response was, they were just like incredulous that this could happen. And then like kind of, panicked to figure out like how we communicate, how we let people know, like how we inform people, fortunately that particular audience was open to, hearing. The thing that's more challenging is, when you have someone that you're speaking to that like wants to gaslight you or say that you're doing something for some other reason, and it's just, it's unbelievable because, the documents speak for themselves. These are things that are coming directly from a district, and anyone has the ability, because this is, you have the ability. It's called a Federal Information Act, in other states you can do this.
And you're not making it up. You have the proof. You have the documents. Right. And so you have, this is, to me, this isn't, and you've said this before, this isn't even a political issue. Right. This is a parent right issue. Right. So how do you keep your message grounded in that truth when people are trying to tell you, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist, you're pushing your agenda? What's your response to that?
I think that, I'm a parent, and like that is at the very, I think that unless you're a parent, like you may not really understand like what you will do to protect your kids and to make sure that they're okay, and I think that we have all of these things, right? Like we have our experiences of our children. We know, we were talking before we came on air about the fact that, maybe our boys when they were little, like my son playing with a princess carriage, like that doesn't mean that he is a different gender. Then later on, he became like a crazy football, really into football. And so, but I think it's just sad because it's like, it's not allowing these kids, it's robbing them of being able to explore anything and then be safe enough to become who God made them to be, or if you don't believe in God, like who they're supposed to be. Like, I think one of the most destabilizing thing a kid can ever experience is having them question their own reality. So taking something as basic as their gender, like, and when they're a really, really little kid, like, I just see that will create identity crisis for these generations of people. And it's so much damage and it's so much harm. And really what we found from all the records is that it is most definitely, being promoted because of funding.
It's a big moneymaker. Mm-hmm. And you created this grassroots movement, this grassroots effort. Have you seen a result of your hard work, of your team's hard work?
I think so, but it's hard to identify, or, and I always just want to like remain in humility, right? Like, because this is like, we're doing this all together. And I was saying to you before too, like, oh, I always hate doing these things. Like, I don't want to be visible. I don't want to do this, but it's like when you come into contact with these kind of records and you see this pattern and you know that this is happening, you really have to sit down with yourself and say, like, can I go through the rest of my life like just saying, oh, I'm just going to protect me and mine? Like, you can't. You need to share that information. I would protect your child in the same way that I would protect mine. And it's your decision from there. If you're like perfectly fine with being kept in the dark, that's up to you, but just
but here's the information. I'm giving it to you.
But one of the things I was saying to a friend recently is it's like, my kids go to a Catholic school. We can't have prayer in public school, so if you want this type of thing, because to me it's like their religion. It's like a cult. So if you want that, create your own schools, like for that specifically, and send your children there, like we send our children to Catholic school because we want them to learn about.
Because you have school choice.
Yes. Yeah. But I think like what's not fair is to like keep things in the dark for people that, don't have the time,
that consent, didn't have that information,
and like the months of time that it took for us to get like responses on these records, and the ways that they try to like use your language to get out of sending the record. And I can't remember, I don't think I finished up before when we were talking about Irvine, of just like since 2023, like we are not getting the numbers, and what we were looking for is to try to show like, look, you've got this center that's working in coordination with UCI and Chalk, and they have this collaboration. So we want to know now, how many kids do you have in the pipeline for this? And it's a basic sales kind of thing. Like, could you go into a school and say you had a product? Like, you couldn't come in the back door and gain access to kids. Like, why are they giving access to other people's children without their knowledge or consent? And then writing laws that keep parents in the dark even more,
So what is, along those same lines, what is your advice? What's your advice to parents who don't know or don't have the time really to research it? What's your advice to these parents who are just kind of opening their eyes to what's going on, to the realities of their students in their schools?
Like when you asked me that question, like, what was your moment? And I said there wasn't like a distinctive moment. There was just sort of like a slow opening of the eyes. And then like, I too was like not wanting to believe certain things, which is why I think I went for the documents, And so that would be my advice, is just, communicate with people about things. Like, I remember, really not wanting to be like embarrassed or ostracized or rejected. Like, everyone feels that way. Like, nobody wants to be rejected, right? But what I found instead was that other people were talking about the same things, and then we became aligned. And there was someone who had reached out to me recently through Moms on the Ground asking like this particular question. And I was thinking this morning, like I didn't answer that question properly because I kind of, I was in a hurry, and I think I answered something like, okay, so find people in your school district who think like you do, and get aligned with them, and what I should have answered was like, please send me those documents and let me connect you with people that I know within your community. I think that that is the main thing, is definitely you have your circle of influence. We all have our circle of influence. So, and that is still the thing, like despite social media, despite the media, despite commercials or ads or whatever else, like everyone has their personal circle of influence. And, you know, I'm more likely to listen to you when you give me a recommendation because I know you and I love you. Right. And so like, if you say, Melissa, go down here, like I'll say, well, Madison told me so. And people have those community, you know,
there's a trust. There's you have this relationship, so you feel like you can trust. And I feel like for me, that's the biggest issue I have right now with school districts is there's no trust. So what can school districts do to better connect and better include parents in the conversation?
I think that first of all, you got to have the district representatives who have skin in the game, who are parents, who are not people that are like looking for, you know, to be on the make, right? Like you need parents sitting in these positions. And a lot of times people think, oh, that's someone else. I think especially women, like, you know, they'll think like, I'm not qualified to do this. But we really do need parents to be sitting in these seats to start with, and people who have skin in the game and, you know, are stakeholders, right? By having their children in the schools. That's the first part, because right now we have a lot of people sitting in these seats that, you know, what a lot of people don't recognize is in this, and I did not recognize when I first started getting this information, is that that's the first political stepping stone. So a lot of times, like if somebody has higher aspirations for public office, you know,
they start in school districts.
Yeah. And so the Democrat Party, and they have them organized, like several deep, you know, and they all drink the same Kool-Aid, right? Like they will go along with these, whatever their ideologies are, and they will, no one questions it, right? And it is that one worldview. There's no tolerance for any other worldview. And so,
well, and there's also, it's hidden, right? So I'm sure you've seen at school board meetings where the district employees, they put consent items on your agenda. And there's sometimes 70, 80 items in there. And in most school districts, you get these consent items and you vote for all of them in one yay. That's all you do. You say, all right, we have 80 items in consent. Let's vote. Anyone want to pull any of them? And if you don't pull them, you don't get to discuss them. You vote on it and that's it. And so I feel like in these school districts, there's a lot of hidden items that if you're not a school board member, parent that cares and that does their research and actually earns their $700 a month, which is pathetic. But if you're not aware of what's on those consent items and doing your research and having a team of support that help you to research what's in those consent items, unfortunately, I recognize that the district employees sometimes also did not have the best interest.
Yeah, they are. I mean, that's the thing in these records. Like you see all these employees that are very aligned with, you know, these political people who have like a political agenda. Like it's not about the kids. Like forget about it. It's not about the kids. It's about their political agenda. It's about what's going to make money. And like you said, it's really difficult to be informed when they've got 80 things lined up, and they do have plans. You know, these GSA leaders, there's always a... Can
you elaborate on GSA?
GSA means Gay Straight Alliance, or a variation of that, depending on what district you're in. But these are people who, you know, lead these groups. There's generally a teacher advisor. So not generally, I think always, there's a teacher advisor. And
on the high school campus, middle school campus.
And it's not just high school, it's middle school. There are K through 8 schools that have these people on campus that are arranging this stuff. And generally it's like, those are the relationships. That's what we saw in Capo. It was this relationship between a school board trustee, communicating with teachers, and, you know, they send out these mass emails to these people who are like activists, you know, and
through the teachers, from the school board member through the teachers to these coordinators of these community centers.
Yeah. And it's a conflict of interest, you know, and it's a violation of the Brown Act as well, like from the trustee, but they're pretty smart about like what they put in writing, how they communicate. But we found records that say like, please call me. And, you know, but yeah, the teachers, you know, will put things on the calendar, and and the thing, like you mentioned the thing about the $700 stipend, like,
big money.
I know. Well, and you got to think, like, what are these people's motivations on this? And the ones that are sitting in those seats with, no children and no, they do have higher political aspirations. There's money to be made in
really
politics.
No stake in the game.
How do these people, right?
Yeah.
And as far as like with parents, that $700, like the way that I look at it, because everything that I've done is volunteer. And my husband is always like, could you please like
get a job, lady?
He's like, could one of these things be a money-making thing? And I just feel like, there is a passion that is more powerful than any money you could ever be put behind any type of movement. And that is a love of a parent for a child, and that is so much more powerful, and that our reward are in the end are well-adjusted children and a world that our kids inherit that is functional, and the way that things are going here in California, there are a lot of kids that already have challenging situations at home, a lot of different things facing them. Like, do they really need this in front of them? Like, it's like, as we say all the time, like, it's predatory, and it's just, it's tragic, and it's going to it's destroying lives already. Like we see the evidence of that already, but like to even start earlier, like they are starting earlier and earlier to, try and indoctrinate kids into like these ways of thinking and beliefs. And it's just wrong that we're paying taxes. Like, I don't align with this stuff. Like, I should be able to use these schools, you're not allowed to push things that, it's a public school. And I actually had a trustee say to me like, well, public schools aren't for everyone. And I'm like, no, I'm sorry, they are.
My money literally funds you.
Yes, they are. Your
$700 is my tax
just
money.
Because you've been successful in pushing a lot of these things that have been profitable to you. It's like these children are not for sale.
Right.
So,
and as a mom, as a parent, your kids, you mentioned, are quote unquote, they're safe. They're in a school that is a place where your husband and you chose to send them, and yet you're still paying, your tax dollars still do go to the school that your kids were supposed to go to, the public school. And so when you think about it that way, but you also think about the kids who don't have representation, that have dual working parents, that are working multiple jobs just to make ends meet. Those kids don't have a mom or dad at home that can tutor them. They don't have a mom or dad that can make sure they're doing their homework. I mean, maybe they can eventually, but it's different. It's different than having, maybe a stay-at-home parent. And so when you look at it that way and you think about what you're doing and the coordinated effort that the school district is doing on the other side, it's very disheartening and frustrating because they're getting paid. These school district employees are getting paid and being given these allowances to indoctrinate and to sexualize children. But here you are, this volunteer, crazy conspiracy theorist that has the documented proof that these school employees that your tax dollars are funding are actually indoctrinating, grooming children. That's crazy. Yeah. And there's nothing you can do about it except expose it and bring it to light and hopefully get a clean, core of employees back in that district. And also your school board. You have these school board members who represent you. And so that was a lot to say, just to ask, what is your hope for the future of public education? What do you hope everyday parents can do to change the trajectory of your school district, but really all the school districts, because this is not just California.
Well, I think that definitely I like this idea of like the money following the kid. So a school choice situation, because, the proof would be in the pudding with that. And, I think I mentioned that earlier about like, okay, if you want a school that's promoting this, then you can choose that. But what you're not going to have is all of our resources going, towards this stuff that we don't want, and so it's sort of like, I almost think it's like they have this monopoly, and it's like monopolies aren't allowed. Like, there need to be competitors and, it would tease out, the real success and failures. And, we can already see from just focus on the academics in schools in California, like they're failing these children. They're not preparing children. They're not educating children. The other day I got this, a parent sent me a video of these little kids that were on UCLA's campus, and they were little kids, I would say around like 4, some of them 5, and they had these cardboard signs with SOS about the planet Earth. And I'm thinking, like, why are they not like reading, like at story time? Like, why are you trying to make these kids feel so unsafe, like on their planet, like the very planet they live on, they're in danger, and the body that they're in is not correct? How destabilizing is this to young children? It's infuriating. And I feel like, as an individual, if you can wake up in the beginning of the day and you can hear something like this and you don't do anything about it, you don't even have a conversation with your friend, like, I don't know, we have a moral obligation to stand for these kids, whether they're ours or not, like it's just, I think that the money needs to follow the kid. And I think that it needs to be very clear about what the schools stand for. And you would very quickly very quickly see what is a success and what is a failure,
Yeah. And I think getting our curriculum back to basics, focusing on actually teaching children, because they already are struggling. Our students, I don't remember the exact statistic, but I feel like California is like 48th out of 50.
That's what I thought. It was 50 out of...
Maybe it is 50 out of 50, but it's bad.
It's really bad.
And how?
And they're just and they just pass kids along and have them passing, and like that is...
And we have the most money.
If you're spending your school day doing that stuff, and this actually happened at that private school that I was telling you about, and the parents need to be aware of that as well. Like there are private schools out there that will call themselves Christian. You need to know what's going on in the curriculum. The great thing about the public schools is that you can do public records requests. You cannot get these kind of same records from a private school.
There's public records that you can look up. You can do your research and know what's going on. You can ask those questions, but I think it's just being involved and being informed and being active in your own school district. That's a really easy way to simply be present and hold accountable
that is
people in your district.
Yeah, that's what the thing that I was saying about like the private school that we were in, is that there were some things that, were happening that I was like, wait, what's that about? And having a conversation with my kid that I was like, that doesn't sound right, and then like digging into that a little bit more. But,
right.
But yeah, it's just, it's sad. Oh, that's what I was going to tell you about. Like, if you're using this time, that they're at school during the day where there should be instruction, academics, math and reading and writing and these types of things, there's only so much time in a school day. So if you're taking a kid to UCLA with a cardboard sign to talk about how their planet is unsafe, like, first of all, you're emotionally, I think even physiologically, like dysregulating a kid, having them feel unsafe. Secondly, that makes it harder for them to take information in. You're taking away from instruction time. Like, I don't co-sign this. I don't want to pay for this. And I would guess that the large majority of parents would not want this either. They just don't know that it's happening. So how do we figure out how to inform them? And I know that it's hard for a lot of parents to accept, or for this to all be palatable, because it's so insane. Yeah. It
really is unbelievable.
Yeah.
I remember when I first spoke to you about this, I wasn't in complete shock, just because I'd already kind of woken up to a lot of things, but it still was just so alarming how much was being hidden, how much communication was happening without informed consent, without parents' knowledge. And I encourage everyone who's watching this to look through Melissa's amazing Trans Student Hustle. There's so much information in there. I know Melissa has social media. She's on Moms on the Ground, and I'm a huge fan and a huge follower. I've been following you for years now. So Melissa, thank you. Thank you for coming on today, and thank you for all of this information. Is there anything lastly that you'd like to say?
We do experience getting shadow banned on our Instagram. It is at momsontheground.ca. And so just everybody, if they can check that out and, pass things along to their friends, that would be great. And there's a lot of, we have a podcast. That was a way that we put out, and it's a Moms on the Ground. It's on YouTube and Spotify. And the name of that particular, where we go into all this documentation, it's just a few records, but we have thousands. And but it's hashtag Trans Student Hustle. So
you heard it,
up.
Trans Student Hustle. So make sure that you go and check that out and stay informed. My name is Madison Miner. I'm with Protect Our Kids, and this is our Say What podcast. Thank you so much for being on here today. We have social media. We have X, we have Facebook and Instagram that we would love for you to go check out. We also have our website, pok.org. Please go there, visit. There's free information that you can grab from there to be informed, to help educate those around you. And most importantly, make sure that you are staying on top of what's going on in your students' schools. Make sure you are following what they're doing. Make sure you are asking those questions like what Mellisa said today, because it is so important for us to make sure that we are protecting our children and our future leaders in this nation. So thank you for being with us, and we'll see you next time.